Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Anurag Saran, for the scholarly and the incisive account of the philosophy of the Zoroastrian world. We in India have been blessed with the Parsi population. Somebody's loss was India's gain. And we also have a Parsi saint by the name of Avatar Meher Baba, whose teachings and whose books are indeed the bestsellers for all times to come. They have eternal wisdom in them. The Parsi as a community are less than 5% in India, but they account for 60% of India's industry. The top barristers, the advocates, doctors, scientists happen to be Parsis. The top taxpayers happen to be Parsis. There has to be some magic in their mental makeup that though less than 3%, they have never sought any concession, they have never sought any reservations, they have never sought any special status, yet they have proved that there's something divine about them. Our next illustrious speaker is no other than the one and only one, Professor Dr. Mahmood Maseli, and may we request Professor to enlighten us with his words of wisdom, please.
Thank you so much. Good morning. Good morning. It's a pleasure. I'm honored for being granted another opportunity to present an idea. I'm very well aware of the fact that I cannot go more than 10 minutes. I try to keep shorter. Just to find, there's something there. Where is that? Just give 1 second to find it. I put it somewhere. Okay, it is right here. So I want to start my talk shortly with one story. I told you I was talking to dear Elizabeth last night. There's a Sufi figure in Iran, maybe in the rest of the Sufi lands, I don't know, whose name is Mullah. Mullah Nasruddin, but Mullah is not the same as religious leaders. He was one of the serious critics of those who somehow behind Islam. One night, someone was walking in the neighborhood, and he noticed that Mullah is searching for something on the ground. It was the street lamp there, and Mullah was searching seriously somewhere. That person was a neighbor of Mullah, asked, Mullah, what are you doing? Famous one. Mullah said that, okay, I lost my house key. I'm looking for that. So the neighbor decided to help Mullah to find the house key. They looked everywhere, couldn't find the house key. It was fruitless. The person who was the neighbor of Mullah asked Mullah, are you sure that you have lost your key right in here? He said, no, I lost it in home. So neighbor says, so why you are looking for your key in here? You lost it over there. Mullah said, because inside is dark. And there's light outside in here. I want to start by this story. Something is dark right in here, dear Elizabeth. That is why we are looking for superficial light out there. And that is why we have lost ourselves. I want to start by this story. My mentor is a Canadian philosopher whose name is Charles Taylor. Those who know Charles Taylor, the famous philosopher in the world. I produced my dissertations in 1 degree PhD in international relations, other PhD in philosophy, using Charles Taylor, enjoying Charles Taylor's idea. So it came to my mind to dedicate my talk to a distinction between, regardless of the topic over there, regardless of the title, to make a distinction between the conception of the good life and the life goods, according to Charles Taylor. And so in addressing of the point, it came to my mind to write it like this: why we should discuss a link between politics and spirituality? What is the reason for this? And my argument simply is that politics, especially modern politics, deal with something that we call it the good lives, because politics, as the Lord protector of the wishes of people, the materialistic needs of people. That is the job of politics, to protect people, to have a wealthy life, healthy life. They have whatever they want. Politics is maybe the means in assisting of people to know how they can satisfy their own materialistic needs. Or politics is something in a modern sense of that to turn everything into a kind of commodification in order to satisfy the greedy nature of people. But the spirituality goes in a different way. Spirituality deals with the conception of the good life. So what is the good life and what is the life goods? I want to give a very short 5-6 minutes idea about that. So I want to move faster. So that is the topic. I want to start by this question. Or before, just another thing came to my mind, that because of jet lag, of course, we are not able to sleep. Today, I woke up around 3 in the morning. I was just in the room walking or laying down, just counting the second to go for breakfast. I come here. I was looking at the news, and something really shocked me. Last year, Credit Suisse published a report on the condition of inequality in the world. Based on the last year report, as far as I remember, it was stated that only 1% of the world population owns 50% of the wealth in the world. 1%. What shocked me was the news that I read today morning by Oxfam, saying that right now, 1% of the population is controlling 86% of the richness and the wealth of the world. That is what I'm saying. That is politics. Just want to remind you. So I started by this question, okay, could modern politics somehow do something around human well-being or not? And my answer simply is yes, if politics is inspired by a quest, by a search for a good life. What makes life good, according to Charles Taylor? And of course, I want to say that the spirituality, at least instrumentally speaking, let's say for now, is the one that gives us a kind of opportunity, capability to understand what the good life is, as opposed to the good life. That is the whole argument. Of course, I'm not going to go through details of that. So, what is the good life? And what are the life goods about? Life goods, simply speaking, in a few sentences, are about all goods that we need for addressing our own natural inclinations and needs. We are in need of a car or safe job, career, income, good house, traveling, going to resorts, beach, or whatever. Good life. We want to be very good. We want to be happy. These are goods. And unfortunately, we have been too much confused in today's world, or the modern world is very much confused about this, that the life is the one that is fully provided, that is fully protected by the goods. Goods, what satisfies us, what gives us a kind of hedonism, a kind of materialistic satisfaction, etc., etc. The life good that I want to favor, I'm using the idea from my mentor, Charles Taylor. The good life, as you all know, I'm not supposed to talk. You are in here, are masters of this conception. The good life is the one that refers to the deep levels of understanding of who I am, who you are. And I know, I try somehow to attain my selfhood. I can do that only through the good life. Life good is not the good road to give me a kind of sense of who I am. But the good life, I'm lost in kind of superficiality. But good life is the one that gives me a kind of fulfillment, human excellence, and richness. By the good life, I know who I, as a human being, am. So the argument that I want to make is that, unfortunately, from the beginning of modern time, from 16th century, from the age of, some people would say modernity, that unfortunately turned into modernization and caused a lot of problem for us, for humanity. From the dawn of modern time, we can see that politics came into existence in order to mislead us from the good life toward the life goods. And I want to say that this has been costly for the world. And the costs are terrible. And we do not know how to cure the costs. Either costs at the individual level, as you said, the stress, and all different types. Also, there are costs in the systemic level of that, either the nationalistic system or international systemic of that. I want to look at all different costs. And my argument in the end simply would be that, okay, spirituality has a kind of capacity, I want to say. I would like to avoid to use the concept of power. And spirituality has a kind of capacity to show us how we can move from that kind of superficial understanding of the meaning of life in terms of the life goods toward the good life. That is, I believe, the role that the spirituality must play in today's world at the center of the life world, according to Habermas. I'm using Habermas' conception of the life world. And that is the role that spirituality must play. The problem with the spirituality, according to me, is that I'm somehow spiritualist too. Of course, I'm coming from Islam, from Iran, and have certain kind of understanding of the things. I read a lot from many different types of Kabbalistic traditions and Christianity. I read St. Augustine. I did a lot around St. Francis and a lot of things. But you know, the problem that bothers me as one individual person is that as one, I person, as the member of a we, is that spirituality has become too much isolated. Too much isolated. Spirituality is not willing to play a role in the social life, in the real life, in the world of politics, in the world of agony. Spirituality is missing as a play. So my argument simply is that spirituality can give us a direction if comes to the fore and plays something, and addresses the real needs of people in the world in all different levels. So that is the question, and the answer, I go quickly to fewer slides. What is the good life and what the life goods are? Please look at this slide as quick as you can, and please move to the box below the two. So even secularism has been distorted. Basically, people assume that secularism means, okay, leave your religious idea or spiritual resources and inspiration, everything, leave it aside, and just follow a kind of pure materialistic conception of life. I would say that that is the biggest problem, according to me, in today's world. We are often confused, that one with this one. Not the good life, but the life goods. Everybody's a kind of racing with other persons, struggling, constantly struggling for having money and wealth and glory and reputation and other things. They want to have a secure life under the banner of the life goods. And that is the thing. That is the problem. That has been costly for us. So the question is how to move toward the good life. So that is still I'm playing with the question. But of course, no time to go through everything. As I said, being confused with the meaning of life, being confused regarding how can I know who I am and how can I attain my selfhood, myself, and how can I move from my selfhood toward establishing of my personhood as a person in the real life, in this process, from the self to person, with the rights and duties and responsibility, etc., etc., we have lost what the real key in the life is. And this reminds me of Mullah Nasruddin, who said that, okay, inside is dark. Because we have not been able to understand who we are, we do not know. We look at the light out there, and the light out there is the wealth, as reputation, and there's glory, and there's rest of that. It has been costly, as I said. Some of them, gamutes of ills and evils, in all different sense, in all different meanings of that. But I want to move toward this one. Please look at that one. What is going on at the level of structure of the world? A systemic view into the problems of today's life. Look at that. That is the consequence, the tragic end state of humans, restless, a struggle for having good lives. Life goods. Life goods, just the wealth and the happiness, material satisfaction and so on. Look at that. The world is also almost moving toward all dimensions, all its directions toward this kind of disastrous situation. The mainstream social sciences and humanities, the mainstream management, the mainstream politics is not able to address all those problems. Rather, it's producing and generating more and more and more. I would like to suggest that spirituality is the key, as Mullah Nasruddin said. Look at yourself. Here is dark. What to do to get rid of the darkness instead of referring to something outside of me? Of course, people are paying for that. Everybody's paying for that. I would like to say that spirituality can be one of the alternatives in addressing of today's global concerns. I do not want to say that that's the only one. There are many different ways and perspectives, many different alternatives that should be explored, according to me. But spirituality is one of them. In my presentation, I would like to say that there are three main, maybe alternatives that can be collaborative with each other, working together to know how the global concerns can be addressed. The first one is global ethics. That is something that I do in my profession, in my works. Religion is another one, but I would like to put more emphasis on the role of spirituality. I believe that spirituality has a more effective capacity to address global concerns and global challenges than either religion or religious ethics, or even global ethics as a theoretical field of knowledge, for example. So I'm not going to look at the details, just to say that the spirituality has this power. But the problem, as I said, as I'm going to look at the problem with a little more detail, is that spirituality has been isolated. It has created a kind of solitary life. We feel that we're so happy, according to me, and I'm sorry if I'm saying this, but I want to say that I want to be a spiritualist because of my own peace of mind. Then what about you? Should we follow a kind of self-regarding view of spirituality or the other regarding of spirituality? How can I be a spiritualist as long as I think about myself, purification of my soul, in order to move toward God, etc., etc.? To rest in the arm of my beloved. I'm a lover. Through love, I want to rest in the arms of my beloved. But everything is about me. And that is the biggest problem with the spiritualist movements in today's world. I would like to say that spirituality can be truly a kind of term, spirituality, if spirituality starts a shift away from self-regarding sense of spirituality beyond saying that from an Islamic perspective, okay, spiritual person is a person who lives with the Spirit of God. That is too much, according to me, selfish. Just to me, because I want to be happy with my God, with my beloved. You must think about other regarding. Or perhaps a kind of dialectic can be created between the self-regarding view of spirituality and the other regarding dimension of or face of spirituality. So all the spirituality has, I believe, the capacity to address most of today's concerns and issues. The non-existence of a kind of emancipatory analysis or emancipatory interpretation of spirituality has caused other kind of problems for us. There are many spiritualist groups that are isolated, somewhere sitting, worshiping their own God or moving toward their own truth or whatever. And unfortunately, they give more opportunity for those who are destroying the world. I want to move to then this slide. Oh, sorry, we have one more. And that is the last one. When you look at the spirituality should have kind of, as you can see from the slide, 4 dimensions, according to me. Explanatory dimension, spirituality should show me, must let me why. Why? What happened? How? I want to know. That brings me to a kind of Gnostic understanding of what, for example, mysticism is, as we follow in the Islamic sense of that. The spirituality, as in the first dimension, explanatory function, gives me answer to the question, why? What happened? In a higher level understanding of spirituality, we have the evaluative function of spirituality. That gives me answer to the question whether what I have done has been successful or not. From explanatory, kind of descriptive, it's better to put descriptive, yeah, better. Descriptive dimension toward the evaluative dimension. Move to the third dimension, please. Look at the slide. Orientative dimension or function. The spirituality, after helping me to understand why, and giving me in the right-hand side top a view of how I can evaluate the living condition based on my understanding, must give me the direction, where to go, and that is the whole story of spirituality, minus the last one. I want to say then, my claim is that the true spirituality as a kind of antidote, if you like, as a kind of antidote against both the unbridled global capitalism and also spirituality as a kind of antidote against religious extremism and terrorism and so on, should have a fourth dimension, prescriptive dimension. The spirituality should show me how to act. And that act must happen, must occur at the center of the real life, and not in the isolation, in the taper or somewhere, in the meditative centers, etc., etc. So my argument then simply is that if you think about spirituality from the perspective of emancipation of people, liberating of people, and if you take the responsibility, not the duty, responsibility to give response to the existing concerns and issues related to the life in the global sense of that, we must think about the fourth dimension, this prescriptive dimension, how we can act. I believe that that dimension is missing. Give you one more story, I'm going to stop. It's very short, 1 minute maybe. Remember, I was talking to my friend the other day that Gabriel came to Prophet Muhammad Rasulullah and asked, okay, what is Islam about? The story is very simple, from a hadith Qudsi. And Prophet said, listen, Islam has 3 layers, maybe, 3 layers. The first layer is called Islam. Submit yourself. Submit yourself, then you are Muslim, no matter what you are doing. And that is what is happening in today's world about Muslim communities. All have submitted themselves to that very superficial level of understanding of what the whole thing is, Islam. Prophet told Gabriel that there is a higher level in this faith or whatever that is called Iman. Iman is a stage or a kind of condition when the message of the faith penetrates the soul and the spirit of believers. The Prophet said even that one is not Islam. Islam is associated with ihsan, coming from husn, and husn means beauty. Be beautiful, love beauty, and generate beauty. So the question that is related to this topic is that how we can be with beauty. From a kind of mystical perspective, in my last sentence in this very short presentation is that we argue that the spiritualists are those people who want to bring beauty to the world. In order to bring the beauty to the world through Islamic perspective, Sufism, to bring the beauty to the world, we must be practitioners, active players, global game changers. We must act together, be together, and fight against all patterns of human suffering, including inequality, justice, etc., etc. Only in that way we can argue that spirituality could have a kind of capacity to address global concerns. I'm going to stop and just share with you just this one from Rumi. Please, look at that. What can I do? Muslims, tell me. I do not know myself. I'm neither Christian nor Jew, neither Major nor Muslim. I'm not from East or West, you know that, or that's famous one. Not from land or sea, not from the shafts of nature, nor from spheres of the firmament. Unfinished. And please look at the rest of that. Rumi says that Rumi says that the role that must be played by spiritualists is the role that is played by the members of maybe community of mankind. So the spiritualists are those who dedicate their own life in ending of all patterns of suffering, in trying to find some solutions for global concerns, and this is the ultimate goal of spirituality that results, at least I want to say, to a kind of condition in which people have a kind of understanding of the good life as opposed to the life goods. Thank you.
That was very enlightening, Professor Dr. Mahmood Hussain, and goes straight from your heart to everybody's heart. There is no denying the fact. All of us would agree that your sentiments echo the sentiments of Walt Whitman, the Sufi poet of the USA. The East is mine, so is the West. I am bigger and better than I have thought, and all the civilization is mine. To turn the circle inwards. We have last, we keep the best for the last. Dr. Rice Steller, Assistant Professor of Philosophy, Leiden University, Netherlands, on Plato and the Jewish prophets. Thank you very much, Dr. Rice Steller, sir.
Rico. R-I-C-O.
Rico, oh, I stand corrected, my profound apologies. Dr. Rico Steller.
Thank you. 1 second. Yeah. Okay, we have coffee now. Hello, Sarosh. I hope we can relax a little for our last contribution to this first morning session. And I'd like to discuss with you a problem of the relation between politics and prophecy. And I take prophecy as a substitute or an extension of the concept of spirituality that has been discussed so far. I will not talk too long, maybe 12 minutes or so, and I will mainly focus upon a very interesting philosopher you may not have heard of before, Herman Cohen, who wrote a beautiful text on Plato and the prophets. But let me start by asking the question, a rhetorical question, of course, you're not supposed to answer right now. What is the ideal politician's primary virtue? Ideal politician, not talking about average politician, but the ideal politician. What is their primary virtue? Common sense or sensitivity? Strategic thinking or compassion? Prudence or idealism? Well, you may say both, because without idealism, politics is perverted into tactics, if not to sheer negotiation of interests. However, idealism, which is so dearly needed in politics, idealism can easily relapse into realism, thereby losing its sense of critique towards anything which is simply given. Idealism may turn out to be merely based upon the historically conditioned rather than on a dream. To put it simply, an ideal can easily be confused with what is just reality, with what is just real, and lose its character of being an ideal, of being a dream. Okay, so much for my more general introductory remarks. Let's now turn to slide. Does it work? Sorry. Yeah, Okay. Herman Cohen. This is just a thinker. There's no time to discuss him for his own sake. No need to. A Kantian philosopher from Jewish origin. He wrote 3 Kantian critiques, just as Kant did. And I simply would like to draw your attention, especially to his last book, which was also translated into English, The Religion of Reason, out of the sources of Judaism. But leaving aside all the details, I'd like to focus on the topic. Herman Cohen, who is a philosopher from a Jewish background and who somehow tries to combine the two. A very big provocation in his own time, as much as it would be today, I think. What he tries to do is to combine Plato, in other words, philosophy, philosophical philosophy that is, not just any philosophy, but Platonic philosophy, idealist philosophy, on the one hand, with the prophets, the Jewish prophets, and any other prophet that is truly a prophet. That is a prophet only if they have a dream about the future that is yet to come, but still not fulfilled. Can these two be kept together? Herman Cohen believes, yes. Why? Well, because both Plato and the Jewish prophets, they share a sense of radical transcendence. I don't know if you're familiar with Plato. I hope you are. What is the most important idea of Plato is the idea of the good, which is supposedly at the other side of being. It's not even among the ideas, it's on the other side. Epikanates ousias is beyond anything else. It's fully transcendent, the idea of the good. And on the other hand, the Jewish idea of the transcendent God that cannot be identified with nothing, and not with a person, not with the content. God is different from us. So that is what, according to Herman Cohen, the Jewish philosopher, Plato and the prophets share, the idea of a radical transcendence. However, both need to complement each other, since the weakness of the one is the strength of the other. So whether or not they share this idea of ultimate transcendence, Plato is weak in one respect, the prophets in another respect, so they need to complement each other. In other words, philosophy needs to be complemented with prophecy, and prophecy needs to be complemented with philosophy, because the one cannot do without the other. To translate it into the language of this conference, a spirituality without philosophy is weak and bound to die. Okay, let me start by addressing the problems in Plato, and then the strength of Plato, the problems in the prophets, and the strength of the prophet, and then come to a conclusion. Okay? So I'm following Herman Cohen. I'm sharing this idea with Herman Cohen that philosophy and prophecy need to mutually complement each other. And please try to translate this into your own language. So start with Plato. There you have them, two of them together. I try to combine two pictures, which you never see in the same slide. Plato, as you know, is a philosopher, but he is not just a philosopher. According to Cohen, he is the philosopher. And any philosopher that wants to be truly a philosopher needs to be Platonist, that is, needs to be idealist, that is, needs to put ethics at the center of their philosophy. Plato does this by putting the idea of the good and ethics as a justification in the center, the idea of the good. And if you ask me, what is that idea of the good? I cannot give you an answer. Nobody can give you an answer. Plato discusses this in the middle of the Republic, the idea of the good, and not even the interlocutors of Socrates understand what he's talking about, because it's not explained. He's talking about the good, which cannot be identified with any concrete content. So it remains a dream, but it remains at the same time as a dream something central. We always ought to ask the question of the good. Now, what is the problem with Plato. Plato is a strong philosopher, he's the only philosopher, and all philosophers need to be Platonic, but what is the problem with Platonic philosophy for the rest? And I think this critique that Cohen exerts on Plato is wider than just on Plato. So what's the problem? Whereas Plato's ethics intends, and this responds to Mahmoud's previous lecture, Plato's ethics intends to invigorate the unity of the soul. So if the soul is not one, it doesn't make sense whatever you say, whatever you do. The soul needs to be one. However, here is the problem in Plato. Plato is, in some respect, a political realist, and his political realism is detrimental to this unity of the individual soul. Let me draw your attention in Plato to this translation of the threefold structure of the soul that needs to be unified, harmonized, that is reflected in the order of the state. I hope you know this. In Plato in the Republic discusses the threefold division of the state into three groups: the philosophers, the merchants, and the laborers. And translated into Indian language, into castes. And that is a kind of political realism which may harm the unity of the soul. So you can be a spiritual person, well organized, leaving the reality outside, the political reality, unaffected, by keeping the distinction between the slaves and the leaders. Another problem related to this, that this threefold unity of the soul tends to create a tension between the affects and the intellect. So a harmonious personality for Plato is someone who manages to keep down their affects, as though the affects, our affective life, our passions, were something bad. Why should they? So that is maybe a first problem with Plato. The unity of the soul is harmed by his political realism, this continuous tension in society. Yeah, thank you. The second problem is Plato's ethnic historical bias, which he has. Plato cannot acknowledge the stranger or the foreigner as having a share in justice. The barbarian will always remain a barbarian. And his ideal republic is built upon society's tripartite structure that has the double flaw of denying the right to philosophical insight into the ideal to the many. Only the philosopher can know the ideal, but not the many. They cannot. And moreover, let me show you this slide at the same time. Yeah, that's what I said. Next, related to this, the essence of the state in Plato is self-defense. You know, the role of the guardians, they need to protect the state. So to translate this into everyday language, it is a military state. It's a state which is still in need of defense. And that invites us to ask us questions about whether Plato's idealism is not harmed by a certain sense of realism that interrupts the dream of his philosophy of goodness. Cohen himself makes a case for the improvement of education, of philosophy, not just for the intelligent, but for all of us. And he makes a case for uniform social justice as the cornerstone of the ideal state. Not just the philosophers, the future philosophers, everybody is entitled to have education. Everybody. The laborers just as well as the intelligent people. So that is a critique that on Plato voiced by Cohen. Now let's turn to there you have it, the prophets. Yeah, I can go fast. The prophets, the Jewish prophets, according to Cohen, who went in a way far beyond the religion, beyond the rites, beyond the sacrifices, beyond the cult, because they had a dream. And they were the founders of the social religion. They said that a religion that does not have any concern for the poor is a false religion. And they even say that the idea of God should start with a focus on the poor. We cannot think about God apart from the poor. So if you want to know something about God at all, focus on the poor. And the poor will invite us to ethics, that is, to responsibility. Okay, so the strength of the prophets, they found a social religion. They introduced the idea of the future, rather than the idea of a golden past of times immemorial that once was, that should be restored. No, there is a future ahead of us, and the future should be kept in mind always. Secondly, the prophets, as opposed to Plato, we must admit, upheld the idea of humanity. Plato, he was the founder of the doctrine of the ideas, but he didn't have an idea of humanity. It was the Jewish philosopher Philo who introduced the idea of humanity, keeping together all individual humans. And the Jewish prophets, they came up with this idea of the humanity which is rooted in the poor, that inspire compassion. The poor in Cohen are equated with the pious. So true piety is the state in which the poor always are dependent. Finally, the prophets, they deny the implicative relation between poverty and guilt. Maybe I can refer to the Indian karma tradition, but I can refer to any tradition as well. This happens everywhere. That to the implicit idea that someone who suffers must be guilty. And the Hebrew prophets deny this relation. Someone who suffers is not guilty for their suffering. No, on the contrary, there's no correspondence between suffering and guilt. So these are the strengths of the prophets, but what is their main problem? They lack a philosophical ethics. Their method is based upon surmise, Ahnung, or contemplation. They have a dream, just like Martin Luther King, they had a dream. But to have a dream is not enough. Having a dream can easily lead one into error and idolization. The dream must be put into practice. The method of contemplation and surmise must be substituted with philosophical, or if not scientific, rigor to make the prophetic optimism successful over time. So to keep dreaming is not enough. The dream should be put into practice. Now, I'd like to end up with a conclusion. You may think, well, this is an alternative, either the prophets or the philosophers. I am a philosopher, I'm not a prophet. I'm a prophet, I'm not a philosopher. How can this be solved? Now, I'd like to continue upon what I suggested yesterday. We should not conceive of ourselves as individuals. We are individuals, but as individuals, we are part of a society. And society is not just a combination of individuals, but can be conceived of as a supra-individual agency. Let me go to the slide. So whether or not the prophet and the philosopher can hardly unite into one person, unfortunately. However, politics, I repeat, need not be seen as a combined agency of individuals, but rather as a supra-individual agency in which a prophetic sensitivity and philosophical sensibility cooperate in the body politic. So the body politic could combine the prophet and the philosopher. Isolating both from each other is as harmful to politics as neglecting either of them. Now, nevertheless, I think, and this is my final remark, it is a political and humanitarian duty to invigorate the prophetic voice in politics and to introduce it into political debates. So not just focus on pragmatics. The dream must be heard, must be voiced. The prophetic sensitivity, rather than on gratuitous rhetoric, tends to thrive, and here I'm following Hammond Cohen, tends to thrive on experienced suffering, guilt and self-reflection. In other words, to be a prophet, to have a dream, is not just an easy, gratuitous thing. It entails the experience, being familiar with suffering, with guilt, and with self-reflection. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Just one question. Okay. Garima, there is gross violation of our human rights. Such illustrious speakers in 10 minutes each. We could go on for 10 days and that would not have been sufficient. But next, I think we need to enhance the time because such learned people in just 10 minutes, gross violation of our human rights. Now, there have been talk of spiritual content of leaders. I have dealt with leaders and I have dealt with non-leaders. And there was a leader whose birthday we celebrated yesterday, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, a man of tremendous spiritual depth. He said, "Tum mujhe khoon do, main tumhe azadi dunga." But he was spiritually inclined. He said, "You give me blood and I will give you independence." Then there are those politicians who do not have the spiritual depth. They say, "Tum mujhe vote do, main khoon to main le hi lunga." You give me votes, blood I will take myself. So it is the difference between a leader who is spiritually inclined, a leader who is not spiritually inclined. Now, Garimaji, I will just take one sentence because that is the respect that I have to pay illustrious speakers. Dr. Elizabeth Denley said, "Physical body is the vehicle of the soul, and all mystical thoughts teach us politics is not just about leaders, but about collective consciousness. Spirituality helps us implement positive ideas, education being the most important of them, depression being the most significant epidemic that afflicts us today, and the remedy lies in the techniques of meditation." Dr. Ann said that thoughts, words, and deeds, there is thesis and there is antithesis, and from that emerges synthesis. There is a simple formula of self-improvement, and as Dr. Mahmood said, to quote Mullah Nasruddin, to turn the searchlight inwards. This is a quote also from the Mahatma Gandhi. Spirituality stands isolated. We need to have a look at it, relook at it. Joshua Liebman, in his masterpiece and the bestseller for 20 years, wrote The Neurotic Pursuit of Materialism. And this is what seems to be an even bigger epidemic than depression. The neurotic pursuit of materialism. Dr. Rico, on the romance of Plato. How Plato can impinge and influence the thinking and his sublime philosophy. And with this, we come to all good things come to an end, including this session. We come to the end of the, if there are any questions, I have been asked for only one question, so first come, first serve, your question, please. If you are brief, we can have the second question. I'll take the liberty.
Very brief. Good morning, everyone. Dr. Hilo, my question is to you. As you were talking about the comparison of the prophets and the Plato and his Jewish prophets, so is it based on the realistic learning of the Kabbalah practice of the Jewish, and or is it on the basis of the 21 books of Zohar which has been used by them? Because in India we have Chanakya, and in the same way in the Zohar, in the later stage in Israel, when they were practicing Zohar, they told us about that in those books, the 21 wisdom books of Zohar in Kabbalah, they have talked about the same concept. They said it's important to have a prophet, it's important to have a preacher, a spiritual leader who can guide a leader, who can guide a king, who can guide a politician, we can say. So is it based on the same concept, or we have not gone for the Zohar part into this, in this comparison?
No, it's not, although it is related. So I will avoid details. Cohen, as a philosopher, is extremely critical of Jewish mysticism. However, his ideas may have traces of mystical relation. It's a very interesting problem, especially in medieval Jewish and Islamic philosophy. You have the problem that you just described of how to bring together the prophet and the politician. They used to combine in Muhammad or in Moses, but we don't have those persons anymore, so we need to divide their functions in over a few. But thank you for your precious remark. Yeah.
Thank you. 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 Than
Question number 2 and the last. If you are brief in your question, we perhaps will accommodate the third question too. And third is certainly the last.
So very quickly, Professor R, this reality of self-deception and its tendencies and overcoming this self-deception, how is related to the dynamics of mirroring self and the other? My quick query to Dr. Mahamud is that the distinction between good life and life good also challenges for further realization. For example, are we imprisoned with the notion of good as only material? Because if we proceed with an idea of spiritual materialism, then the good itself has a spiritual dimension. And therefore, the good also, from Charles Taylor, how does it confront with the challenge of struggle over the good? For example, politics of recognition and the challenge of plurality.
Thank you so much for this question. I would say that we have maybe, in my opinion, we have lost like 2,000 years of spiritual thinking that was too much concentrated on the body-mind dualism. And it is really a pity that we associate spirituality with the life of the mind and that we disconnect it almost from the bodily. So instead of associating the good with asceticism and the life of the mind and the bad with the bodily functions and enjoying bodily, you know what I mean, materialism and spiritualism that are seen as two opposing elements. And in Plato even, we think Plato is a spiritual thinker who was actually promoting spirituality, while there is a real corporeal, how do you say that?
Yeah.
Corporeal. It is so corporeal what he's writing about. He's really somebody who understands that there is this dynamics, constant dynamics. Trying to overcome, you use the word overcoming bodily, yes? Well, I would respond to that, but I have to adjust my whole thinking because I was raised like that as well, you know? The ascetic ideal is a very beautiful ideal. I agree. And for those who can accomplish that state, it is really something I admire so much. But I think that it was the idea to see the two tendencies, the one towards trueness, the one inclination towards falseness. And I think that actually we can retranslate this whole thing of good and bad in terms of this threefold motto. I mean, when you succeed in trying to, in corresponding the words, deeds, and the thoughts, thoughts, words, and deeds, when you succeed in doing that, I would say you are on a good path. But it's so difficult. And it is, well, I would say it's a pity if you cannot succeed, and if every day again you try again and again. We would say that if you can turn this into a social practice, so it is an individual, a struggle, internal, very personal, individual, but as you do this, maybe others start doing this as well, and this becomes a social practice. I think I would just say these words to answer your question. I hope it was an answer to your question. Thank you.
I have a question to Dr. Mahmood.
No, just a second. I am extremely sorry. I'm extremely sorry again. But there are some reservations right now because we have to prepone our valedictory to 12:30. So that's why we have served you high tea during the session itself, because we want to save some time, because our chief guest is arriving a little early, and there are some delegates who are invited for the Kurukshetra trip, and they'll need to leave at 1:30 at any cost, so that they can reach on campus on time. Otherwise it will be too late and not safe at all. So please, I want all of you to cooperate, and I'm extremely sorry. My sincere apologies specifically to Dr. Ashish Pant. I'm really sorry for cutting you short in between. I have to do that in order to maintain the program on time. All right, so there are a couple of announcements which I would like to quickly make, and before that, I would like to invite Dr. Elizabeth Denley to please felicitate our chair and the moderator, Dr. Vikram Singh, with a small token of appreciation, please.